What is the one thing that you don't want to have happen to your brain? Alzheimer's disease, right? It's one of the most feared brain conditions associated with aging, but a lot of people don't realize that Alzheimer's can even appear in middle-aged people. Most people think if you have a genetic risk, game over, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do. The actual truth is that there is something you can do. People eating a diet actually can lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease even if they carry a genetic risk. Researchers have found that people with higher levels of in their blood, they also have lower type 2 diabetes, also have lower risk of heart disease, and a lower risk of early death. What are the practical tips? What can I offer you that's like really practical about it? I'm going to tell you to cut. Hi everyone, Dr. William Lee here. Today, I want to talk about your brain because it's one of the most important organs in your body and no one cares about their brain more than you. And anybody who actually cares about health can't ignore the brain. So let me ask you a question. What is the one thing that you don't want to have happen to your brain? Alzheimer's disease, right? Well, it's one of the most feared brain conditions associated with aging. But a lot of people don't realize that Alzheimer's can even appear in middle-aged people and also form other forms of dementia. But what if I told you that the food that you eat can influence how well your brain ages? And in this case, I want to talk about a 3-lettered word, fat, F-A-T. Yep. That's right. The fat that you eat is connected to brain health. And could the fat you eat today change how your brain ages in decades or from now? So here's the thing that I actually want to tell you, because it may not be what you think. Turns out that fat and brain are interconnected. In fact, your brain is made up nearly 60% of fat. So it makes a lot of sense that the fat you eat could influence that brain function, the structure of the brain, the wiring of the brain, and actually the long-term resilience of the brain, which has to do with how we feel and how we react, how we behave, and how we respond to life events around us, okay? So this isn't just gushy stuff about psychology. This is really talking about how what we eat connects directly to our brain and how our brain responds. If you've ever wondered how much control do I really have over my long-term brain health and preventing Alzheimer's, the answer is much more than you think. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. All right, first, let's talk about the fats that can raise or lower your Alzheimer's risk. And let's start with dietary fat and Alzheimer's disease because they're connected. Before I tell you about the study, if you're enjoying this video, I want you to actually hit the subscribe button because that way you'll be notified when I actually put more helpful hints about your health, food, diet, lifestyle into it. So just hit the subscribe. You know what to do. And that way you'll be getting updates from me. Let's go back to the study connecting dietary fat and Alzheimer's disease. So there was a research study done by scientists at the Zhejiang University of Medicine in China, and they conducted what's called a meta-analysis. This is a major one because it looked at 13 different clinical studies of diet and Alzheimer's disease and involved 21,000 people. And the researchers asked one simple question. How does the type of fat you eat influence the risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia and overall brain health? So what do? Well, naturally, they compared different kinds of fat, saturated fats like butter, dairy, cheese, and saturated fat from red meat. They also looked at trans fat, mostly coming from ultra-processed foods. Most of us know that trans fats are not healthy, but what about the brain? They also looked at monounsaturated fatty acids as well as polyunsaturated fatty acids. Those are called PUFAs, especially omega-3 fatty acids, which you would find in seafood or dietary supplement. Want to know the results? Because they were a little surprising. Here's what they found. First, let's take a look at saturated fat. They found the people who ate the highest levels of saturated fat had a 39% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to repeat that again. People who ate the highest levels of saturated fat had a 39% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And this is important because you should ask, where do we get saturated fat in our diet? And there's a whole movement now looking at the carnivore diet. But the carnivore diet, mostly red meats, actually is loaded with saturated fat. So what are some other sources? Processed meats too. We're talking about the stuff in the deli, the salami, the bologna, the pepperoni. They also have saturated fat. Red meats, as I mentioned, have it. Ultra-processed foods have saturated fat. Fried foods that you might get at a fast food restaurant, but even fry them at home, you can have saturated fat, and dairy. Now, dairy is an interesting thing because some studies suggest that dairy might actually lower the risk of dementia by a little bit. This is some very, very intriguing research study, but it's probably not because of the saturated fat. It's because of other things, maybe the probiotic aspects of dairy. Okay. Now, one of the questions is, why does eating this kind of fat actually harmful to the brain? Well, we know that saturated fats can promote inflammation in the body, oxidative stress, which can damage DNA, damage cell function. And we also know that saturated fats can even reduce blood flow. Now, there's 400 miles worth of blood vessels in your body. So anything that blocks that blood flow could actually have a devastating effect on brain function. What about trans fats? Okay, guess what? They are associated with a 48%, even a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. 48% higher risk of Alzheimer's disease in people who ate the most trans fats. Now, why is that? Well, trans fats can get incorporated, meaning they just kind of find their way into and integrate into cell membranes, including in your brain neurons. That's bad news. You don't want that. Okay. And when trans fats get integrated into normal cell membranes, it damages the cell structure. It weakens brain function. We don't want that. What about polyunsaturated fats, so-called PUFAs? Poly, P, unsaturated, U, fatty acids, FA. Okay. Now, these include omega-3s. All right. And it turns out that people who consume the most omega-3s were found to have a, wait for it, 28% lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. Okay. In fact, omega-3s do the opposite of saturated fats and trans fats. So I'm going to repeat this again. Trans fats and saturated fats increase your risk of Alzheimer's. Omega-3s, polyunsaturated fats, lower it. Completely two different directions. Probably is pretty obvious to you now what would be the healthy recommendation for dietary fat. Now, why would omega-3s and polyunsaturated fats be better for you? Well, we know that omega-3s, for example, reduce inflammation throughout the body, including in the brain. Omega-3s also protect your blood vessels, and that's what I study, angiogenesis, the health of your circulation. By protecting the health of your brain circulation, it helps your blood flow, that 400 miles worth of blood flow, get to all the parts of your brain that need blood flow, so you have better brain function. Omega-3s do another thing. They strengthen your brain cell membrane. So, a cell is, think about it like a bunch of things floating in a plastic bag. I know we don't like to talk about plastic, but I'm just going to use it as an analogy, or a balloon. Okay. Now think about it. The strength of the bag or the balloon, it can be perforated, it could tear. Well, polyunsaturated fats make the cell membrane, the surrounding covering, a lot stronger, and that's good for brain health. Okay, anybody paying attention would have said, well, wait a minute, you're missing one category of fat that they were studying, and that is monounsaturated fatty acids, MUFAs, unsaturated fatty acids. And it turns out that their effect in the brain was neutral, meaning they didn't benefit you, they didn't harm you. There was no dramatic protective or harmful effect. Very interesting research study. Lots of people, 21,000 people involved, looked at different kinds of dietary fats and looked at a really, really discrete endpoint, which is really the development of Alzheimer's disease, which we all want to avoid. Okay, so what are the practical tips? What can I offer you that's really practical about it? One of the most common questions I get is about sleep. Not just falling asleep, but staying asleep and waking up feeling truly restored. Here's the thing. What many people don't realize is that sleep problems are often a nervous system problem, not just a problem with your bedtime routine. If your body is stuck in stress mode, it's very hard to get deep restorative sleep. Your brain stays on alert. Cortisol, your stress hormone, stays elevated, and the wind down to sleep is disturbed. And that's where the vagus nerve becomes very important. The vagus nerve helps signal calm in the body. It shifts you out of fight or flight mode and into rest and repair mode. Pulsetto uses targeted vagus nerve stimulation to help calm the nervous system, which many people find supports deeper sleep and better overnight recovery. It helps your body create the right conditions for sleep so you can benefit from restorative sleep. If you want to learn more, check the link below with more information and get an extra 10% off with the code Dr. Lee, DRLI. Okay, first, and you probably know this already, I'm going to tell you to cut down or cut out eating foods with saturated fats. Red meats, processed meats, a lot of fried foods, ultra-processed foods. Now look, you're probably not going to eliminate all of it, and that's okay. But if you actually deliberately make an attempt to cut down those foods, it's actually going to serve your brain function. All right. So cut it down, way down. All right. Rarely eat saturated fats. Second, you should prioritize omega-3s. So less of the bad guys, saturated fats, more the good guys, omega-3s that actually lower your risk, right? So where do you get omega-3s? Well, you can get a dietary supplement, of course. But I always like to tell people supplement is for topping off. You should get most of what you need from food. What kind of food? Seafood. All right. Of course, salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, those oily fish. You know the drill on that. But it turns out, and I wrote about this in my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, a lot of other seafood that are absolutely delicious, enjoyed in the Mediterranean and in Asian diets. I eat Mediterranean style, okay, which means that I like to blend the best of both worlds, and they're both tasty. It turns out other types of seafood eaten commonly in the Mediterranean or in Asia also have omega-3s, all right, like cod, like hake, like halibut, and shellfish like shrimp and oysters and clams and even squid. Lobster, if you like lobster, they all have omega-3s as well. Now, if you're plant-based and you're saying, well, I'm not going to eat anything with a mother, no problem. You can still get omega-3s by eating the precursors, meaning the substances that will eventually be generating omega-3s in your body. Your body will make the omega-3s, and those are plants like walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. Those are great sources of the linoleic acid that your body will convert into omega-3s. Cut down on your saturated fats, increase on your good fats, the omega-3s, and then I'm going to make you a recommendation because presumably you cook or somebody cooks for you, and what you should use is olive oil, extra virgin olive oil as your cooking oil. So ditch the butter, ditch the vegetable oils, and just use extra virgin olive oil. Much better. Doesn't have saturated fats like butter does. I got to admit, butter tastes good. We all know that. But extra virgin olive oil also tastes great. Plus, in addition to the healthier fats, extra virgin olive oil has protective polyphenols like oleocanthal. Those are some of the polyphenols that you actually get in hydroxytyrosol. Those are the things that you get in extra virgin olive oil, all right? I want to make sure it's really, truly extra virgin. Those polyphenols lower inflammation, and they can protect your brain circulation, so better brain blood flow, and they can actually protect your brain neuron function, the function of the nerves in your brain. I hope that's practical for you because, we're always exposed to eating fat every day, just as a matter of course. Now, we're going to talk about something else too. There is one surprising saturated fat, as I told you, that might be beneficial for your brain. Before I tell you what that is, I want to remind you again, if you haven't done so already, hit like to this video and hit subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can actually continuously get more information that I'm actually delivering on food and health and diet and lifestyle. So I just told you that there are some fats that are bad for your brain health and some fats that are good for your brain health, and there's some fats that you should use for cooking. But there is a twist in the story because researchers have discovered that although most saturated fat is not good for you, there's one kind of saturated fat that looks like it might be the exception to the rule, might be beneficial to the brain, and might actually lower the risk of dementia. And this is what's important. In food is medicine, you got to follow the science. Sometimes, Mother Nature throws us a twist, a surprise, and you have to be able to be flexible to adapt your thinking. This is not a black and white world. Good versus evil or good versus bad. You want to look at the nuances because the details matter a lot. So what is a saturated fat that might be beneficial for brain health? Well, it's called C15. C as in Charlie, 15. And a better, more accurate scientific word that I like to call it is penta, P-E-N-T-A, decanoic. Pentadecanoic, it's 15. Acid. Pentadecanoic acid, or C15, is a saturated fatty acid that was discovered less than 10 years ago, and from a team that discovered it from the University of California, San Diego. Here's how they actually found it. They found it in dolphins, but you can dolphins eating fish, but you can also find pentadecanoic acid in other foods and even some plants. And there's a little bit in dairy, especially Pecorino Romano cheese. All right, anybody who likes to cook, you know that that's actually a very, very special culinary type of cheese. It's a treat to actually have. Don't eat too much because there's a lot of saturated fat in there, but there's some pentadecanoic acid in there too. And basically what the researchers have found is that pentadecanoic acid is very, very important for health. They found it was first important for the health in dolphins, and now they're beginning to see that this actually might play out in humans as well. And in fact, they're proposing that pentadecanoic acid, or C15, might be in fact called an essential fatty acid, saturated fatty acid, because you can't actually, your body doesn't make it. All right. You need to get it in your diet or as a supplement. So let me just tell you what the researchers actually found this type of saturated fatty acid actually does. Well, first, C15, pentadecanoic acid, restores mitochondrial function. To me, that's a wow. The mitochondria are the little battery packs in your cell that give your cells energy. And when your cells have energy, you're going to have energy. And as we get older, our cell batteries, our mitochondria, kind of wear down. All right. And they kind of build up and the bad batteries get stuck in there. And you know what that's like in your flashlight, right? It doesn't work very well. It's not as bright as before. You want to actually get new, fresh mitochondria, fresh batteries. All right. Turns out that C15 or pentadecanoic acid can restore mitochondrial functions, like recharging your battery. Pretty cool. More energy to the cells. Number two, pentadecanoic acid also reduces inflammation, just like omega-3s do. Reducing inflammation is really beneficial to countering those diseases of chronic aging. Number three, pentadecanoic acid or C15 stabilize cell membranes. Remember I told you that little bag, the plastic or whatever around, or the balloon around the cell organelles, you actually want that to be strong. And it turns out that pentadecanoic acid makes the cell membranes more strong. So the cells are actually stronger as well. So that way your cells won't tend to be unstable or collapse. When you're stable, your function is going to be better when it comes to nerves. One additional thing I got to tell you, and this is a little bit scientific, but I'm going to translate it so it's very, very simple. C15 or pentadecanoic acid also activates a special kind of cell receptor called the PPAR. Peter, Paul, Adam, Richard. PPAR receptors. Now, what's a PPAR receptor? There's no reason for you to know what that is, unless you're a scientist, all right? But PPAR receptors are master switches in the body, in the cells, that regulate inflammation and regulate metabolism and regulate insulin sensitivity. So that's pretty cool. Basically, the C15 also activates this master switch that controls your metabolism, lowers inflammation, and helps with insulin sensitivity. So not surprisingly, when they found C15 in dolphins, they found that dolphins who were eating more C15 had better brain function, they had better metabolism, they were more protected against chronic disease, and human studies seem to bear this out in humans as well. So this is an area of emerging research, but it actually is relevant to people because at population level studies, meaning in a community, researchers have found that people with higher levels of C15 in their blood, higher levels of pentadecanoic acid. Now that's coming from their food. They also have lower type 2 diabetes. Remember, I told you it actually helps to regulate the PPAR metabolism switch. Guess what? C15 higher people also have lower risk of heart disease. That's really good. Better liver health and a lower risk of early death. And in dolphins with more C15 also have a lower rate of developing Alzheimer's disease, better for brain health. And in fact, what they found is that C15 protects against the formation of the Alzheimer's plaque, the beta amyloid plaque that builds up in the brain. People with the Alzheimer's disease, they found that in dolphins, more C15, less plaque. All right, protects it. Pretty amazing stuff, right? So remember this. You're going to hear more about it in the future. Pentadecanoic acid, C15. It's sometimes you can find it, it's referred to as fatty 15. Now, because I study food as medicine, my question is, where do you find this in your diet? Turns out that whole fat dairy, in moderation, because there's other saturated fats in there, actually has some C15. And fatty fish like salmon and sardines have a good amount of C15. You know, I have to say this, grass-fed meats, also in moderation, because they have other types of saturated fat, comes in a grass, and it's also found in that kind of a beef. But here's the key. Skim dairy, fat-free dairy, almost zero fatty 15. So I'm not telling you to get full fat, all right, unless it's Greek yogurt, in which case you should get full fat because it's actually good for your overall health. But in terms of fat products, I'm just telling you that getting the skim, getting the fat-free doesn't actually benefit you when it comes to C15. So this whole demonization of full-fat dairy actually kind of distracted everyone from staying away from it. And what we may have been doing at the whole population level is inadvertently causing people to divert from having a kind of essential fatty acid, an essential nutrient called C15, pentadecanoic acid, that the body and the brain actually find helpful. In fact, it might need. So how does this update our thinking in diet and food as medicine? First, the research is still in its early days, so got to be careful. I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor. I'm always very, very thoughtful and careful about how I articulate things. So I'm telling you, this is still research in the early days. But if you choose to eat dairy, because that's one source of C15, make sure you choose wisely. You want to get whole fat dairy and eat it in small amounts. All right. So where do you get it? Whole dairy yogurt or in a small amount of C15 is found in Pecorino Romano cheese. Better eat fatty fish regularly. So the salmon is a great source of C15. And by the way, I'm trying to encourage you not to just fear the three-letter word FAT, fat. You got to actually get into the details on this. Some fat's not so good, saturated fat in general from red meat. Some saturated fat, however, is okay, like C15. And then the omega-3 fats actually are really, really good for brain health as well. I'm just going to actually tell you one last thing. So hopefully you're sticking with me on here. And by the way, if you haven't already, please make sure that you hit subscribe, hit like and hit subscribe. And so that way you'll hear more as I actually put more videos on. But I want to tell you that the Mediterranean diet protects the brain. All right. Even if you've got a genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease, there's a gene called ApoE4 that if you have it, most likely your parents or grandparents also suffered from Alzheimer's disease and it's passed on, put you at higher risk. So I want to actually tell you about that. If you have a family history or genetic risk. Most people think if you have a genetic risk, game over, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do. The actual truth is that there is something you can do. People eating a Mediterranean diet, Mediterranean countries, actually can lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease, even if they carry a genetic risk. So I want to tell you about this because this is new research. Scientists at Harvard and MIT looked at 5,700 people. It's a lot of people. They published a study in the journal Nature Medicine, one of the premier journals. They got these databases, these people from databases, right? 4,200 women came from the Nurses' Health Study, followed for 34 years, and 1,500 men came from the Health Professional Follow-Up Study. So these are population-based studies that look at the health of these people over long periods of time. And what they did is they looked at who developed Alzheimer's and what did they eat. And guess what? Over time, 606 people out of the total number, which was 5,700 people, actually did develop dementia, Alzheimer's dementia. So the researchers looked at genetic risk. Did they have the ApoE4 gene? They looked at blood for blood metabolites, and they also looked at the type of diet, the pattern of eating that people were engaged in over the course of their lifetime. And here is the big finding from the study, okay? People who had 2 copies of the gene, one from mom, one from dad, with ApoE4, this is the highest possible genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease. This is like getting 2 jokers in your deck of cards. All right, it's a worst case when it comes to inherited risk. Guess what? Even those people at the worst risk had a lower chance of developing Alzheimer's if they were eating a Mediterranean diet. What do I mean by lower risk? They had better memory, their biological markers for brain health were better. Basically, overall, lower risk, better brain health. So the question is why? How did this happen? Well, it turns out the Mediterranean diet is filled with polyphenols and healthy fats, including omega-3s that lower inflammation, protect your cells against oxidative stress and damage, and actually help your circulation, help your immunity, help your gut microbiome. So in essence, boost your body's defenses, which is what I wrote about in my book, Eat to Beat Disease. All right, if you haven't read it, check it out. There's a whole huge discussion about the foods from the Mediterranean diet and the health defenses. And by the way, the Mediterranean diet also improves repair if you have damage in your brain, cellular damage. Eating Mediterranean style actually improves the repair, and it also protects your brain from further damage. For example, carotenoids from colorful vegetables like carrots act like shields to protect your brain nerves. Healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil or omega-3s from seafood, plenty in the Mediterranean, protect blood flow in the brain. And I got to say this, the Mediterranean drinks a lot of coffee. Coffee-related metabolites like chlorogenic acid, they have antioxidant function, and they appear to protect and improve cognitive function. That's problem solving, executive decision making, thinking about where you left your keys, what are you going to do tomorrow? All those things, cognitive function, right? So the metabolites in the brain actually are really, really important as well. Foods in the healthy traditional Mediterranean diet protect brain over the course of people's lives over decades. What's the takeaway? I got some good news for you. If you eat like you were living in the Mediterranean or vacationing in the Mediterranean, that is a pleasurable and healthy way to approach your food. It's what I do. I told you I eat the Mediterranean plus Asian style. I call it Mediterasian. If I'm trying to design or plan my dinner and I'm in the store thinking about it, or at my desk trying to write out a list of what I'm going to eat, I think either Mediterranean style recipes or Asian style recipes. You can't go wrong with Mediterranean. Pleasurable way to approach your food based on enjoyment and quality of food. All right. Don't operate on fear. Best way to do this: build your meals around the produce section in the grocery store. Colorful vegetables, fruits, herbs, whatever's fresh, whatever's seasonal. If you're not sure of something, search it on Google on your phone while you're in the store. Hit recipe, hit video. Let somebody explain it to you. I'm giving you an assignment, okay? A passport to go into the middle aisles, because there are some real treasures there used in Mediterranean and Asian cooking. Dried beans, dried herbs, extra virgin olive oil, tinned fish, dark chocolate, whole leaf tea, right? Get my drift on this? So, oh, by the way, healthy tree nuts, all right? It's all in there. How about whole grains? Okay, make whole grains your grain of choice. Oats, barley, quinoa, brown rice. And then go to the seafood section. I don't know everybody likes seafood, but give it a shot. Go to the fishmonger, the seafood section, and see if you can actually find a way to explore. Be curious to incorporate some kind of seafood 2 to 3 times a week in your diet. I know it's sometimes tricky to know how am I going to cook that thing. That's what I'm telling you. Watch YouTube videos. That's what I do. A lot of people are doing that now to find how to cook something simple and cut down on your intake of red meat. I'm not telling you to avoid it altogether. I'm saying cut it down. But I would recommend that you avoid processed meats. You know why? Because processed meats are considered to be a carcinogen by the World Health Organization. And remember, if you eat this way, even if you have a family history of Alzheimer's disease, even if you have genetics that would put you at higher risk for Alzheimer's, eating the right foods in the right pattern, prepared in healthy ways, can put the power back into your own hands when it comes to protecting your brain and having better brain health. And you know what? For brain health, you got to combine it with other stuff too. Exercise, stay physically active, make sure you get good sleep, all right? And manage stress. I know all these things are not that easy to do, but if you're mindful about it, if you make it part of your priority, you'll be protecting your brain. And brain health starts at home. That's not something doctors do. You do that as well. And as always, if there's some particular maneuver you want to do, you should actually discuss it with your healthcare provider, your doctor. And there may be other medical treatments and technologies that are going to be useful for you actually to improve your overall health, including your brain health. So I always tell people, because I'm a doctor, keep your doctor in the loop. Don't cut us out. Make us part of your team. And if you found any of this helpful, hit the like button, send it to a friend who you think might be interested in it. And of course, subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video. Dr. Lee out. Hey, if you like that video, then you're going to love this one. Check it out.